Trial Lawyers University, where the Titans come to train. Produced and powered by LawPods.
All right. Well, good morning, Conal Doyle.
Good morning, Dan Ambrose. Dan the man.
All right. This is Conal. It's probably my guest that I've known the longest that's ever been on my podcast, and probably the best, because when I first got to California, Conal was sure to properly coach me on becoming LA, California, and not a Michigander. There was a lot of work to do. And so I appreciate your dedication, you and Steve King, to helping me adjust to California.
There was a lot of work to do, Dan, and there, maybe there still is a little bit of meat on the bone there, but you have come a long way. Yeah.
A work in progress.
Yeah.
So
We're all works in progress, my friend.
where did we first meet?
Yeah, I think our first meeting was an AAJ convention, maybe 15 years ago or so. Yeah, I think it was Chicago, and I think it was me and you and Nick Rowley and a couple of other guys. I think Aaron DeShaw might have been with us from Trial Guides, and then the gentleman that actually died in a plane crash. I forgot his name. What was his name? He's a nice guy. But
Yes.
5 of us went out, and I remember
Daryl Edwards Jr.
Daryl Edwards Jr. Yeah, yeah. Don't fly your own planes. That's the moral of the story.
That's
However, Dan, you did just recently buy your own plane and are attempting to
I'm
fly
not
it
very slow.
despite the
That's right.
cautionary tales.
Yes, I know. And Conal is one of my friends. Says, Dan, I don't think you're appropriate for it based on your level of ability to concentrate for extended periods of
No.
time. Could be dangerous for you, but now I remember that. Because remember, Nick came up. I was standing in line.
Yeah.
Nick came up, and he's a little more rambunctious back then. He punched me in the leg like really hard and gave me Charlie horse. And I fell to the ground and I couldn't walk for 3 days. Apparently, that was his sense of humor back then.
It was. That was quite a. I was right behind, sitting on a couch right behind my sawtooth. That yeah, you nearly crumpled to the ground. You weren't happy. Let's just say that.
I did crumple to the ground. I was in so much pain, but
I think you did.
kids, crazy kids. I was kids. I
Nick
was
was
45 years old.
just well-meaning.
Well-meaning at defection. That's how I show love, Dan. I'm like,
Yeah.
I get it. So Conal, you've been a lawyer now for probably almost as long as I have. But how did you first get interested in the idea of this gig?
It was kind of later in life. Like I got no lawyers really in my family, and I got out of college like in 1993. I think was my college graduation date. Economy wasn't too good right then, and I had a roommate that was going to law school and taking the LSAT. So I decided, let me do this. Let me try it. And I also worked for a year before going between college and law school, working for a lawyer to see if I would like it. And I really did. I kind of got into it. And I really figured out that I thought I'd be really good at it. And it was a little bit happenstance, man. I mean, it was just, I had a good friend that was going to do it, and economy wasn't good, and the job market wasn't great. So I thought, let's just go to law school. And then when I got into law school, things changed because my 2 best friends as a 1L were Eric Romano and Trey Lytle, whose parents at the time were, both of those guys are legendary trial lawyers now. They're both past presidents of the Florida Justice Association, but at the time, 30 something years ago, their dads were in that spot, and so they kind of influenced me to kind of become a trial lawyer, get into the plaintiff's bar, and I was fortunate to have through their parents, who I got to know as well, that influence.
So law school, where'd you go?
So my first year, I went to Stetson College of Law in St. Pete, Florida, and I transferred out though after my first year. I went to Florida State to Tallahassee to do a legislative internship, and the idea was I was going to come back and finish at Stetson, but I ended up, once I got up there, I liked Florida State a lot and decided to transfer in. I graduated from Florida State in 97.
Did you do any kind of trial ad or mock trial, moot court in law school?
Yeah, I did. Well, actually, yes and no. I did trial advocacy class at Florida State, but it was weird the way I came in, because I came out of Stetson, and I was fortunate. I did well at Stetson. I was number 1 in my class in Stetson, and I would have like graded onto all of those kinds of programs, but I went to Florida State and I had a status as a visiting student, a transfer student. And I only transferred in after my second year, and then by that time it was too late to join a lot of those programs. And I was busy working for the House of Representatives anyway. I was a legislative analyst, and I was, working on legislation, working on bills, and doing the work of a legislative analyst, which is to write up bill summaries and things. And that was kind of where I got started figuring out how to figure out statutory construction and really legislative history. And that's kind of helped me a lot throughout my career, actually.
Were you considering going to politics at one point?
Not really. I mean, no, I don't think I'd be a good politician.
No, I don't think so either. That's why I think it's so interesting that you were doing that kind of stuff.
No, yeah, I'm just too blunt.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, you're not really the glad handing, the
No,
pretentiousness, the unnecessary socializing are just not things I think of when I think of Conal Doyle, so
no, I don't have the patience for that,
no,
unfortunately.
no. So when you get so you get through law school, and so where's your journey go post-graduation?
Yeah, I worked for, I actually talked to both John Romano, and Trey Lytle's dad about maybe going into plaintiff's work, but because I did so well in law school, I was number one in my class, and I had this legislative internship, which is very a prestigious internship. I had a lot of offers from like the top big law firms in Florida. And what I decided to do is to work for a firm. At the time, the name of the firm was Fowler White, based in Tampa. And I had identified them as my kind of my number one choice of where I wanted to work. And the reason is that they were a big full service firm, the largest law firm by number of lawyers in Tampa at the time, even more than Holland and Knight. Holland and Knight's international headquarters was Tampa at the time. But they had a weird setup where they had this huge casualty department, insurance defense, insurance coverage, where they just tried a ton of cases. They just, but they also had like the big corporate and the real estate and all the things you'd have with a big kind of like white shoe firm. And so I had gotten to know some of those guys when I worked or I got to know the firm pretty well when I worked before I went to law school in Tampa as a legal assistant. And I just really wanted to work there, and I got going there, and it was really a phenomenal experience because I had about 11, 12 jury trials in my first 5, 6 years. Tried my first case when I was at the end of my first year, going into my second year, summer of '98, a federal civil rights case, and I did the opening statement across the plaintiff. I mean, I was right there, and I was barely out of law school, won the case, defending a sheriff's office. So I was doing all defense work. So the first 6 years, although we did a little bit of plaintiff's work, I tried a plaintiff's case, civil rights plaintiff's case at that time, but mostly defense. Represented big insurers, hospitals, doctors, a lot of governmental liability defense. So I represented a lot of the municipalities. I represented the state of Florida. I represented sheriff's offices down in Fort Myers, Lee County, Hillsborough County. So it was phenomenal experience. And it's interesting because that's really low paying work, the governmental liability defense, right? And because of that, the partners who have these kind of the billing pressure, right? The junior partners. I was working for a junior partner. He wanted to do the higher paying work because, of course, he needs to make his money, make his hours, make his nut that he has to fulfill every year. And so he would just push all this work to me, and I just started doing it and loved it and did really well at it and tried a bunch of cases. So it was a phenomenal training ground. And then I, from there, decided I was going to move from Florida to California. This was 2003, and I had a big book of business because the partner I worked for actually left the firm. I stayed. I kept a lot of he didn't want to take some of the work, and I kept this book. So I had, like, as a fifth, sixth year associate, a full book of business, and was going to be an equity partner the next year at the largest law firm in Tampa. And I just gave it all up, man. I just got tired of it, and I was like, you know what? I want to be closer to the mountains. I'm a skier, as you know, and there's not much skiing in Florida. I wanted to move west. I had a sister in San Francisco, so I moved to California like 21 years ago, 22 years ago now, and just became a plaintiff's lawyer immediately. And then I also made that big switch. So when you make a big life change like that, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go do plaintiff's work, which is what I wanted to do from the beginning. But this training experience I had at the big defense firm was just invaluable.
So in 2003, you moved to California, but your first stop is not Los Angeles or Beverly Hills. Where's your first stop?
Yeah, I've been here in Beverly Hills now for about 16 years, but before that I was in San Francisco. So I lived in the city of San Francisco for 6 years, and I had a firm there that I started after about a year. I worked for a lawyer named Chris Dolan, great trial
Oh,
lawyer, for about a year and a half,
yeah.
kind of
I can
learning how
only
to.
picture the two of you working together.
Yeah, I mean, we butted heads on some things, we agree on some things, but I tell you what, I learned a lot from him, and so like just that year and a half with him, just learning how to think like a plaintiff's lawyer and learning the California procedure. It's very different from Florida. Was what I needed, and I was like, you know what? I was 34, and I'm like, screw it, I'm gonna go start my own firm. So started my own firm. It's now 20-year anniversary coming up in August of me starting my firm. So it's been a good run.
The highlight of TLU for me was having the opportunity to network with attorneys from out of state.
TLU has been amazing. I'm so glad I came. It was one of the most inspiring events I've been to. Great networking, great food. It's been amazing. I can't wait for next year.
So, Conal, since we had this little break here, I was going to ask you, I forgot to mention, like, what professional accomplishment are you most proud of? I mean, is it the Supreme Court? Is it, so you just think about that, the
Yeah.
Supreme Court, trial lawyer of the year, I don't know, this huge ass verdict you just got. I mean,
Yeah, it's like asking, I guess I don't have kids, but I would imagine
which one's your favorite?
if you had 3 or 4 kids, like, what's your favorite kid? I so I
Okay,
threw
I'll ask you for career highlights. How's that sound? Things professionally
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
that way you can
so
touch on them all, those three things. Or if there's more than that, I don't know. I just kind of like know what a person's. And then the one thing I also ask, is there any loss you've ever suffered in front of a jury where you're just like disbelief, shock, or just like stung?
yeah.
I always like to ask about that too, and just like what'd you learn from it to get past it, because sometimes you get a real stinging hit, makes you question yourself as what you're doing,
Yeah.
especially. So I was gonna ask you that too. I forgot to. So
Okay.
all right,
So we're just off the record now. You wanna go back on and ask some of the stuff, basically?
yeah. So I'm gonna finish talking about this transition to the plaintiff's bar, moving to Southern California, and then becoming trial lawyer of the year so quickly. That really
Right.
helped a lot. You know what I mean, to get
Yeah.
comfortable in the area, because you're
Yeah.
new in town. It's not easy to meet new people,
Right.
especially when you're a solo practitioner
Yep.
or you're on your own. It's not like you're working at a firm making friends, right?
Right.
Okay, so I'm ready back on. So, kind of after about 5 years in the lovely overcast San Francisco Bay, you decided to move to Beverly Hills. So, tell us how you came down here to get your start down here.
Yeah, so I got a couple of cases down in Southern California, and I started coming maybe in 2007, and I started coming down to LA to do depositions and hearings and things for a couple of years, and I really just started to get to know the area a little bit. I just thought, I kinda like it down here. I kinda like LA.
Me too.
And I could have kept my practice in either place, but this case that I had down here was one that was brought to me by through the ACLU, through a great organization I've been on the board for many, many, many years, called Public Justice. Public Justice, ACLU went to Public Justice. Public Justice came to me to represent this immigration detainee who had his penis amputated and died of penile cancer because the federal and state governments wouldn't provide him just really basic necessary medical care, a biopsy to rule out cancer. And that was a case I worked on for about 7 years, and it spanned sort of my time in San Francisco all the way through LA. And in the middle of that case, I decided to move down to LA, and then didn't really know anybody down here. Same thing when I came out to California. I didn't really know anybody.
I know how that feels.
Yeah, I
Except,
know, so it's just like I was in my 30s at that point. I was just taking risks, man. I didn't care. I was like, you know what? What's the worst that can happen? And I was just swashbuckling kind of, and just doing stuff like that, just moving places without knowing people and not caring and just figure it out. And it worked out really well. Luckily, I took a lot of risks, but it worked out well.
well, this case that you're talking about, tell us a little bit more about that case that brought you down. That
Yeah, it would be an understatement to call it a wild case, but it was a case that had two tracks. A case against the state of California in state court, and then there's a case against the federal government and federal officials in federal court, as well as state officials in federal court. You can't sue the state in the federal courts, the 11th Amendment, so you got to kind of break up the cases. It's odd. But The case, they filed a motion to dismiss in the case when I first filed it in federal court. I filed it in like November 2007. They filed a motion, and in January or February, the district court, really great trial judge called, his name is Dean Pregerson, he writes a scathing opinion, and he says that the federal officials' conduct in the case by failing to provide this poor gentleman a biopsy to rule out his penile cancer was beyond cruel and unusual, and it was basically fit the very definition of what they should teach in law school about what a violation of the Eighth Amendment means. Got some attention, and so 60 Minutes calls me out of the blue and says they want to interview me and my client. So, in I think it was, April or May of 2008, all right, I go on 60 Minutes and talk about this case. And so from there, things start snowballing. I start getting other cases in LA, and the case ended up in the US Supreme Court a couple years later. I argue the case in the US Supreme Court, and then the issue before the Supreme Court was whether you could sue individual public health service doctors in their individual capacity. The court ruled against me in that 9-0, and I personally argued the case. And we were kind of in this scenario where our federal case was gutted. We still had the claim against the United States, but there was damages caps in California that would apply, $250,000 medical negligence cap, and then I had this state law case against the state of California that was set for trial, and we'd just taken this big loss. At this point, Dan, I had done an amputation injury case for a friend, settled it a couple years before, had a nice fee on that, and I basically took that whole fee, which wasn't huge. I mean, it was maybe $1 million, but at that time was a pretty good amount of money. And I blew through that whole, all of it just working on this big case. And so I didn't make any money in like 2009, 2010. And I had to go to trial in 2010 on the state case. And I had to borrow like 25 grand from my mom, my parents. My credit cards were maxed out, and they had a $10,000 offer on this case. And so my biggest mistake in the case, I didn't ask for more money, but I asked for, I think, 1.75 million, and the jury gave me every penny of it. And then shortly after I got that verdict, the U.S. Attorney's Office was sitting in the gallery watching me try this case. They came up and they paid like 2 million on the federal case, where there was only there's a 250 damages cap. They paid 8 times the cap. So I made this kind of creative argument about choice of law, that the law of the District of Columbia should apply. Anyway, it's getting in the weeds, but it was a great result. We ended up, 7-year case, long story short. And then by the way, the jury trial verdict I got was reversed on appeal. But there was state individuals still left in the federal case. We were going to go back and try that. And the state pays another, 7-figure settlement. So we got, at the time, was one of the largest, if not the largest, like settlements, wrongful death settlements. It was only like maybe 3.5 million or something, but for someone with a felony conviction and undocumented, and he didn't know his daughter. They only had one heir, and it was a daughter that he never really didn't grow up with, or didn't go to any of her birthdays or Christmases, didn't have a close relationship with until he got out of jail when he was dying. He died during the pendency of the case. And that was a case. I just moved down to LA in 2009, and 2011, the Consumer Attorneys Association of Los Angeles voted me the trial lawyer of the year. I didn't know anybody in LA at that time, really. Just moved down there. And I think I'm the first lawyer ever, and even since then, that's won that award without like knowing anybody. I went to the vote on it, on the award. I couldn't find the Cala building. I didn't know where it was. I was circled the block. I was late, and then I didn't understand how the voting worked. I didn't think I was going to win. I was like literally in the bathroom, taking a leak when the award was announced. People have to go find me in the bathroom, take me out. I didn't have any idea. And so I really, that's something that I'm proud of, and I think I was got me off to a great start in LA, because I realized that the lawyers in LA are not too insular, and they, at the time, they really voted for who they thought was the most deserving, because there were some other really heavy hitters that were up for that award that year, and they had great results, like it is every year with a trial lawyer of the year award. So
Who'd you beat that year?
had some great lawyers. Adam Shea from Panish's office had a great verdict. Carney Shakarian had some amazing verdicts. He had like 5 or 8, maybe 8 verdicts. And what a great guy he is. What a great trial lawyer he is. Matt McNicholas was another one. I remember all these guys. Greg Smith, great lawyers, great stories. Yeah, and I just got lucky.
In addition to, winning this trial, arguing in the Supreme Court, winning Cala Trial of the Year, what else would you say are like career highlights or proud moments?
Man, there's been a lot, but I think two stand out from in addition to that one for very different reasons. One was a result I just had last year, and it was just affirmed by the Delaware Supreme Court a couple weeks ago. I'll tell you about that in a second. But the other one was one you know very well. So I got to tell the audience a story. So
Oh,
so I have this case that's venued in Bakersfield, California. And for those that don't know California, it's arguably the most conservative jurisdiction in the state. It's a Republican jurisdiction. I think Kevin McCarthy's from there. Like it, it's where plaintiffs' cases go to die, and particularly medical malpractice cases go to die. There'd never really been a really big verdict in Bakersfield at that time. This was 2014. And it was a challenging case, really challenging case, but it was a paraplegia case. It was a big damages case. And I'd been brought in to try the case, and you would just move there. And I remember every time I would see you out somewhere, some social event, you'd be just pestering me because you didn't know a lot of people, and you were trying to get to, and you would just come from Detroit, right? And you didn't have your bar license at that time, even in California, and you just wanted to get into trials so bad, man. You just loved trials, right? You loved being in the game, and you're like, hey, man, you got any trials coming up? And I told you about this case. I made the mistake of telling you about this case, right? Because then you were hounding me every time you saw me. When are we going to try this case? When are you going to try this case? When are you going to do it? Let's go. So anyway, I finally get to trial on this thing, and you're pounding me, and I'm like, God, man, this guy won't just leave me alone. Um, and so I was like, Dan, why don't you come up? And you're like, I've got a buddy, Danny Rodriguez, up in Bakersfield. He's gonna, I'd gone to and by the way, I'd gone to the Trial Lawyers College like in July of 2013, doing this Jerry Spence method now. So I was coming off of that, and you were like, let's go and practice your voir dire. And I'd never really practiced voir dire before. And I don't try enough cases to be really smooth, instantly, because I try maybe a case a year. I have a very low volume of cases. I'm not in there all the time. So I was like, you know what, that sounds like a good idea. And you came up. Remember that? You come up in the first weekend. We practiced the voir dire. Danny Rodriguez gave us his space, and we got mock jurors off the street, and I'm, practicing the voir dire and everything. And then you were like, well, do you want me to stick around for your jury selection? I was like, yeah, all right, sure, come on, I'll get you a hotel room. And you were coming up for the day. And long story short, man, you were up there for a month, right? And you might have gone back a couple of weekends. I didn't go back on the weekends even. I lived in Bakersfield for a month for this case, but ultimately we got the highest medical malpractice verdict in county history, and it was the highest medical malpractice verdict in California history at the time, present value. It was 26.8 million. And we also got around the microcap. So we've got a pretrial ruling that the medical malpractice caps did not apply to this case. And that was really a historic case. It changed the way that neuromonitoring was done in California. They instituted new policies and procedures because in this case they had an unlicensed kind of a gentleman that was doing this neuromonitoring, this dangerous spinal surgery, and they didn't have a neurologist online watching it. It was wild. And I remember how much you helped me. I mean, you weren't licensed yet, so you didn't really come on the record, but you were there for me every day, giving me support. And you did two great things during that trial. You helped me with my crosses at night. You would remember one in particular. I was like crossing this young, inexperienced, right, neuromonitor who's like 21. And I was like crossing him about like, he barely passed high school. He had like a 2.0. And I was, like, you had a 2.0 in high school, didn't you? I was kind of an aggressive cross on this poor kid. And you're like, don't cross him like that. Just actually ask the question open-ended. And of course, as a trial lawyer, right, you're always on your crosses thinking, you got to do, leading questions, you got to control the witness. And you said to me, you probably don't even remember this, but you said to me, there's a lot of people on this jury maybe that had a 2.0 in high school and they were proud of it. And if you come in there being kind of like attacking him and demeaning him, you might offend some people on the jury. And you also just it might be better if he just says it himself. So he's kind of ashamed of it. And then you come across as a little softer. And I thought that was phenomenal advice. And I did that. And I came across really well in trial. And then the second thing you did was, I know you're going to remember this really well, but you know, the biggest problem in our case is that we settled out with the neurosurgeon who did the surgery, and we were just doing these intraoperative neuro monitors that weren't physicians that were there just to inform the surgeon if there was a loss in the electrical signal along the spine during the surgery. And the surgeon went up on the stand, and he was not a good witness for us, obviously, because we had sued him at one point. But he agreed to meet with us afterward to talk about his testimony because it was going from a Friday to a Monday. And we went up to Fresno, we met with them, and you just sort of spent a bunch of time with him and just got him turned around to not be so nervous and to just be more to have his own voice and to do better on cross. And then we continued examination on Monday, and we just turned him around. That was a really turning point in the case. I mean, you made a huge difference.
So my memories of these things or highlights would be that as our neurosurgeon got demolished like on a Tuesday and he had surgery or something. So we're like, hey, we're gonna have a few days before. And then remember Huey, whatever that guy's name was, that
Yeah.
ding dong defense lawyer.
Oh,
Was
don't say that about him. He was a good lawyer and he was a good guy, but yeah,
oh yeah, but he was like he did some things in that were memorable though,
he
like
did.
but
Yeah.
that were really helpful. But he got all upset and he wanted to go right away. And then because like he wasn't prepared at all because nobody prepared him for his testimony, and he was just getting shellacked and like there was. And so I met with him to try to get him to focus his mind and like actually, because the guy's focused right here, and so he can't pay attention to everything that's going outside. And so that was it. But also, don't forget who carried all those heavy boxes every day and dropped you off every day and carried all these boxes.
You were the
And
best Uber driver ever.
oh my God. Every
Yeah.
day I'd be like, Conal, do we need all 20 of these boxes? You look at me up. Yup. I'm like, oh, okay. I take like 3 trips down there with the cart. I'm like,
I wasn't that good at tech back there, right? So we had all the stuff in hard copy, and I didn't have we were low tech. And the other thing about that trial is at that time, Blanco came up. We got him involved in the middle of the case. He did a couple of witnesses.
he did John Kawai's mom.
Yeah,
A life care.
Sharon Kawai. He did the direct of Sharon Kawai, and he did the direct of The Economist because I had to spend all my time working on these cross examinations of all the medical experts, kind of complex. So he took that off my plate to help me free me up to do to focus on my crosses. And then after that, you guys started the Trojan Horse, shortly after that, and I could see how you worked with that neurosurgeon and how you kind of got him refocused, and that was kind of like I feel like that trial was kind of a springboard for you to kind of just be like, I'm going to do my own consulting business.
You know what? I'm sure he gave me some confidence because you come out here and you don't have a bar card and you keep failing the bar, so it's going to be a while. You got to find something to do that's productive and hopefully, because like I was couch surfing back then too, and so the fact that I had a place to stay, because my memory was we went and did the focus group, and then you're like, hey, do you want to stay tomorrow for jury selection? I'm like, sure. I got a room to stay in, great. And then after that, you were like, do you want to stay and watch the opening? And then it was like I was just there. I'm like, great, this is great. I'd love to stay. I'm very involved. It was a lot, but it was an epic journey in so many ways. And
Well, I was so arrogant back then. I was up there just by myself. I had no paralegal, I had no associate, and they had 4 lawyers on the other side. And I thought, oh, I'll just, I'm the man. I'll try this case against these 4 lawyers. I'll kick their ass. And which was stupid. I mean, we ended up doing that, but
but
I mean, I needed some help, man, and you were very helpful to just in a lot of ways providing support on that trial because you can't do it all alone, man. You got to have a team. And I just didn't have a team back then, and
and it's interesting because that witness preparation stuff that I had developed back then, like I started doing quite a bit of that for other lawyers. And, as the world turns, Wednesday in a couple of days, I'm headed down to Dallas to do a 3-day witness prep and direct workshop boot camp for this law firm down in Dallas. And so, you know, it just took me a while for me to define my stuff and, to be able to make a living doing it. So I'm very
yeah.
fortunate for the start you gave me, Conal. I mean, without Conal Doyle, who knows what happened to young Dan Ambrose? I might not be a TLU.
I don't know about that. You would have found your way to that. You're too passionate about this, but I played a very, very small role in it. But I'm really glad that I could.
But then you did the Trojan Horse, I think, in about 2016 with some other friends of ours like Jack DeNove and Tom Dempsey, and the Carnes brothers were there, and Tiffany Chung. So what are your memories of that? Because like I'm like, Conal, come do my training program. We're like, I don't know. I don't really do that. I'm like, come on, man, it's gonna be.
Yeah.
So what was your memory of that Trojan Horse program?
Honestly, the thing that sticks out is, remember back then when you started that Trojan Horse program, you've evolved over the years, and you evolved in particular with the Trojan Horse, but you were really hard on the participants at first. Remember that? And so, you know, you weren't soft and friendly, and you were like, you gave them tough love. Let's just say that. And I remember DeNove got pissed at one point, and he tried to do a role reversal, and he sat you in the chair and cross-examined you on whether or not you were an asshole. He's like, Dan, you're an asshole, aren't you? And then you weren't ready for that. You were taken aback because he's doing it in front of the group, and you were like, I don't, Jack, what are you talking about? I'm like, no, you're a fucking asshole, aren't you, Dan? And then he kept doing this cross. That's what I remember. I'm sorry.
Okay, at least you have some fond memory of it.
Yeah, I do. I have a fond memory.
That's important. That one memory of all the, it was only like a 3-day program back then, but so that trial up in Bakersfield, that was, everybody remembers their first 8-figure verdict, I think, and it's always that was your first 8-figure verdict, right?
It was, yeah.
Okay. And so, and then you said you recently had a great result that you were extremely proud of from a career standpoint.
Yeah. So there was 2 things that were memorable about it. One is the plaintiff was one of my best friends. And the other thing that's memorable about it is that it's after the pre and post judgment interest are added this summer. It's going to be a little over $100 million. It's fully 100% collectible. They posted a $95 million bond on appeal. The Delaware Supreme Court affirmed the judgment 3 weeks ago. So it's going to go back to the Chancery Court. It was a stock shareholders' rights case in the Delaware Chancery Court. So it'll be my first 9-figure verdict.
Surprised it took you so long.
Yeah, the bonus is that it's collectible, and it was for a really dear friend of mine who's a great guy and really, really deserved it. So
that's awesome. And there's a lot of pressure when representing a friend on anything, because you've got the regular pressure of being a professional, but then you got that friendship pressure too, of somebody that's trusted you, that that you care about, and that fear of failure and letting people down. So that's makes it more special, but makes it more pressure too.
That's true.
That's true.
And so you have to practice in the deposition. You practice in motion hearings. You practice at the grocery store. That's why you have a family. You practice on them. You have to keep the skill up or it erodes. It's simple as that.
Somebody give us an overview of this case.
Or I call wowing it. And what I mean by wisdom of the wise is, why are we still right in spite of this fact?
These are just some of the clips when I was cross-examined 10 years ago, remember that.
About 11 o'clock at night, and he leaves this message. I got a brilliant idea. Every conversation he starts, I have a brilliant idea.
But welcome, everybody. We've got a good crowd here today.
So Conal, it's hard to tell, nobody can tell by looking at you sitting here, but you are I think without dispute, I think it's uncontested, the greatest one-legged trial lawyer now living in this country.
That's a tremendous compliment, Dan. Thank you. I don't know whether that's true or not, but I'll take it.
All right. But as much as we may joke about that, we used to joke about that with the other fellow there that he talked about from New York. But I imagine growing up with one leg has challenges beyond what anybody can imagine. So can you tell us a little bit about that experience and how that kind of influenced, who you are today? I mean, because, people meet you. I always joke, I always used to say, like, it's a good thing God only gave you one leg, because it kind of evens out the playing field with the rest that he gave you. He gave you both. It'd be just too unfair. Because we tried that case. Yeah, I remember like a couple years after that being in your office, we just moved into your new office, and we're having some discussion, and King says to me, or we were all standing there about trial lawyers that seen who was the best, and I look around, I'm like, honestly, Conal's the best I've ever seen, and he's like, oh God, oh now he's going to be unbearable. He was a lot before, but now that you said this, he's going to be unbearable to deal with, and so.
Well, you did used to say that I was the best. But that was before you really got into doing your trial lawyers university. Now you don't say I'm the best anymore because you're talking to all these legends all the time. But that's okay.
Well, it's only
I can
only
I
'cause
can
it's
deal with
been
that.
10 years since I seen you in court, but
Yeah.
when I get a chance to come sit and carry your boxes again and hand you papers, then I will reaffirm that you're the best. But in all seriousness though, because I know you do a ton of amputation cases,
Yep.
and that's really, that and TBIs are, what you really focus your practice on, but obviously you have insight that no other lawyer could have, but still, like, growing up and stuff and the
Yeah.
challenges of a child.
Well, it's a state of mind though, I mean, first of all, I was born without my right leg, without my right femur, so I've known nothing else. And I was fortunate too. I was, 6'2" and very athletic, and
Handsome, forget I
I don't
mean,
know,
people
I
can't they're
don't know
just
about
listening
that.
to this, they don't know that you look like the world's most interesting man.
That's
Got a little
well,
salt and
not
pepper going
quite not
down.
quite what I once was, Dan, but I was a good athlete. I was a really good athlete. And so sports really gave me a lot of self-confidence. I have great parents, man. My parents are the best. I mean, they're just the best. And they just really were so supportive of me. And I really got to give them a lot of credit. But I played basketball, I played volleyball, against able-bodied athletes, and competed really favorably. And then really it's interesting later in life what I did, because I was a ski racer too as a kid, as in you and I have skied a lot together, and that's my passion.
Passion, like,
Yeah.
passion. I
Yeah.
mean,
I mean, I ski 30 days a year probably is my average. But I, you know, I got into ski racing actually against adaptive athletes. I competed against the U.S. Paralympic team and the Canadian Paralympic team, Australian Paralympic team. I never made any of those teams. I was not a Paralympian. I want to be clear about that. But I raced against them in the same races and was nowhere near as good as them. What I realized is that those athletes are incredible. They just train all year round, and with ski racing, of course, you slide on an edge just a little bit, and you lose a portion of a second, and every time you do that, it just adds up, and you have to be so technically good. And but I did that when I moved from Tampa to San Francisco, 2003. I took a season off, and a ski season off, and I raced. So I don't know. I just have always been a real competitor, and I've just decided I wasn't going to ever let any challenge kind of get in my way, and I've carried that through my legal career, as you know, taking really tough cases to trial, and been on a couple of occasions. Didn't talk about the first time, but I was all in. I mean, if I had lost the case, I would have been net, less than zero net worth. Let's just say that.
we would call it a major setback. Is there any cases that you've lost where it's like really stung you, where you're like, wow, like, like I just cannot believe that happened. I just like, where you question yourself at all?
I'm honestly no. I mean, I haven't been straight up defensed in a jury trial where I tried the case myself as first chair. I've had a couple of mediocre results, but they weren't surprising. I mean, I haven't had. I've just been fortunate. But the other thing too is I don't try a volume of cases like a lot of guys do. Like I really pick my spots. And when I started my firm 20 years ago, I decided I was going to have 5 to 10 cases. Chris Dolan thought it was crazy. I told him my plan. I'm like, look, Chris, you've got all these cases, you've got all these lawyers. I just want a small firm. I want 5 or 10 cases. I want to know everything about the cases. I want them to be big damages cases. I'm going to do amputation injury cases. He thought it was nuts, but I've been able to do it somehow. And I probably don't make as much money as some other lawyers, and I certainly don't have as big a firm, but I know everything about every single one of my cases. I do focus groups on all my cases with Jack Denovi's brother, Chris Denovi, and I do these focus groups. He's got a great focus group kind of a program. I do settlement documentaries. I interview. I videotape the witnesses. I do just so much. I put so much work into these bigger cases just to add the value, because you can add value with the bigger cases that, I just kind of I'm so choosy and I work them up so well that, I mean, the vast majority of them get resolved.
That's the goal, isn't it?
But I will say though, losing that argument in the U.S. Supreme Court was a sting. Like, I ultimately did great on that case. To answer your question, I would say I didn't lose the case overall. I won the case. I won trial lawyer of the year for the case. But there was a period of time, like for 6, 8 months before I got the verdict in the state case, where I had put years into this case, and it was all the eggs were in the basket of getting outside the microcap in California by getting a constitutional claim that survives against an individual officer, and the Supreme Court just took that away, and I get up to argue it, and the first question out of the box, fucking Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and she's not with me. And that's not a good sign if you're a plaintiff's lawyer, right? So, I mean, that was rough. That was rough. It was not, yeah.
Right, especially when you don't have much success so far in your career or money, and you get, punched in the face like that. Even though you got off the mat and you recovered, you don't know that while you're laying on the mat, and they're
Right.
counting that you're going to get your second win and kick some ass. So
Yep.
I can imagine what they've been like. So you're coming with a good mutual friend of ours, a close mutual friend of ours, Sagi Shickhead, to Huntington Beach, which I'm very excited about because Conal occasionally misses my conferences, which I am always in shock that anybody would miss my conference, but it happens occasionally. But this one I'm extremely proud of because it's our fourth year doing the Paseo Hotel, and I've, this is what I do right now. Soon I'll be trying cases. That's why I'm not doing. I'm gonna go out and look for a case I could try with Conal Doyle. That's what I'm gonna do in the next few months. But you and Sagi are doing a 1-day on Thursday, like TBI, I call it a masterclass, and and you and Sagi put this together. And tell us about, but just before we talk about your masterclass, how you kind of focus your practice on, in addition to amputations. I know that's a big part of your practice, but also like TBI cases and and the work you've done to get the body of knowledge to get you in the position we're at now.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been doing TBIs now for, I'd say 15, 20 years. And honestly, I don't really do the mild TBIs. I don't view a TBI. I know a lot of lawyers, and there's lawyers out there and talk about this and say, evaluate every case for a TBI. There might be a TBI in every case, and they're sending the clients to the neurologist and this and that. And I don't view it like that, man. I don't think that every case is a TBI. I turn down a lot of mild TBI cases. Don't really like them. Every once in a while, you'll get one that's a legitimate one. And one of the things we're going to be talking about in this class is how to identify like the mild TBI cases that you may want to take, because most of them you don't, but a lot of them you do, and there's just certain characteristics of those cases that need to be there. So,
When you say there's certain characteristics of those cases, so with the mild, what characteristics do you need that is something that you're thinking or consider taking? If they're not there, you're like, that's not worth I can't put my time in,
right,
hard into it.
Yeah, I mean, you need a great plaintiff, and you need a plaintiff that has a great set of either coworkers, family, or friends that can tell the story. So the problem with that, though, is that it takes a lot of work to interview all these people. And so the mild TBI cases, a lot of times you don't know exactly what you have until you're well into it. But in my case, I spend a ton of time. I get a videographer. I sit down. I do settlement documentaries on these TBI cases, and we'll be showing some of those at the presentation, actually, of how you put this together and how you interview how you tell a story through the before and after witnesses. So with a mild TBI, the before and after witnesses are everything, because by definition, you're probably not getting a case where the plaintiff lost consciousness at the scene or has a Glasgow Coma scale of anything other than a 15, and sometimes you don't even have evidence of head trauma on some of these cases. And a lot of times the imaging studies don't show significant pathology. I mean, so those are really hard cases, right? So where's your objective evidence? And so, you have to have this, this before and after setup that really works with the witnesses, and they have to be good. They have to be convincing. But before that's all I have to say about that. But I just want to say something about Sagi, because Sagi and I kind of met similarly to you and I. And but even before, like I met Sagi almost 20 years ago, like 17, 18, 19 years ago at the Southern Trial Lawyers, in Mardi Gras.
Uh-huh.
And, so I've known him a long time. And this guy, he's a brilliant lawyer. He's so, as you know, I mean, he's so successful at what he does. And he's such a great guy. But this was a guy that, and he likes to go out and have a good time like everybody else. So he could be out till 2 a.m., right? Socializing, networking, 3 a.m., whatever time it was. At 7 or 8 a.m., he is going to be sitting in the front row of the audience at the best speaker, and because he has such a thirst, a knowledge to learn, and I wouldn't be there. I'd be sleeping because I don't have that. Some people can go out and get up and I'm not one of those people. I need my rest. So he would be he was always there. I'd be talking about how and if I wanted to know how the CLE was, he was the person I wanted to be able to talk to. So I love it now that the roles are reversed and we have all these people come and see him. I'm really excited to do it with him because super thorough guy, really knowledgeable. It's going to be a great presentation.
What else? What are some of the highlights of the class that you can touch upon for people who are strongly considering it? Because there's so many great workshops to do, and obviously, if they do your master class, they're not doing other things. But the good news is, all the other lecture tracks are being recorded, and so that way, the folks that come to your class or do the other works, they get involved in these master classes and workshops, won't miss the lectures because there's some great trial lawyers coming.
Yeah. Yeah, they're really, I mean, there's always great competition. You always have the best speakers in the country. And so, whatever people decide to do, they're going to get a lot out of it. But what we're going to do here, and the great thing about the format is we've got the 6 hours, right, for the workshop, right? We got a morning and an afternoon session. So we can really not only cover things in depth, but also breadth. And so we're going to take this thing from the basics, from intake all the way to trial, and go in depth in a bunch of different areas. The outline is on the website. It's really phenomenal. We're going to get into all of these issues that both not only younger lawyers or more inexperienced lawyers maybe don't know or need to be better at, but also experienced lawyers. And so we're going to take it through what are the things you look for to identify a TBI case. How do you weed them out? How do you work them up? To neuropsych or not neuropsych, right? Like that's always a big issue in these cases. And what's going in California, there's been a really bombshell case called Randy's Trucking in the last couple of years that affects our ability to get the raw data, the test data from and the test booklets, the questions from the experts, and it's super controversial. There's a lot going on right now. I just litigated that issue in a superior court and got a really good order on that recently. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. That's a really cutting edge, really important issue right now. And it's really across the country though, because it just has an application all over. Because you really need to get with these neuropsych, these defense neuropsychs, you got to get all the data because they will fudge these exams in so many different ways. Dorothy Clay Sims does some great stuff on this. She's one of the experts on it. I consult with her on it. And we're going to take it through the trial. I'm going to show how do you put together a settlement documentary. So it's not going to be focused just on trial. I know this is a trial lawyers university, but the reality is most cases are settled, and it's really important to figure out how to work the cases up to get full and fair compensation without taking the case to trial. And if you can't get full and fair compensation, of course you try the case. But so we're going to talk about how to posture the case for settlement, how to work up your before and after story, and then in trial, what do you do? It's going to be awesome.
Great.
Yeah.
It's going to be awesome. And I just, because I've evolved a bit, so I'm going to be teaching a class on performance skills, and it's going to be interactive, even though it's in kind of a lecture format. I'm going to give the foundations of it all, the basic skills of eye contact, controlling your facial expression, hand movement, voice, creating space. But also I'm going to have people get up out of the audience and do a 2-minute of their opening statement, and then take that and show them how to apply these skills to what they're currently doing, and hopefully give them a whole new insight on the way to basically create an illusion, a hologram of the story. So it feels like this is jury kind of feels like they're watching a movie instead of listening to like a story read to them, is how I would say it. And then I'm doing another to throw it back. I'm doing a presentation on witness preparation and direct examination, because do a great direct, you have to have a well-prepared witness. And I think the key to having a super well-prepared witness is a witness who's relaxed and confident and really understands how to, when they're asking a question, that make sure they understand that question. But then when they do, to actually, look in their mind for the image they have to access to answer that question. So therefore, they're seeing the story in their minds, and so therefore they're congruent, kind of like we did with DeReza. So that way, he was back there in the operating room and even though he was on that stand testifying, when he asked a question, he'd pause, go back into the operating room, answer a question from back there, and come back. And so this is just from helping and working with so many lawyers. Now, so many lawyers are just, even when the more experienced ones, they just don't spend the time to really prepare their witnesses properly to testify, and don't prepare even the testifying part. It's like the first time your client testifies in front of people about their story, it should not be in the courtroom. It should be before that, so they can start to get used to the pressure, used to those eyes, used to being relaxed, used to being able to let their emotions show, even though they're up there on the stand, right? Because that's very fearful for most people. I mean, most lawyers stand up and they start shaking and get nervous. Think about that poor plaintiff who thinks that everything is riding on them, and so
And I think the biggest thing that even the best trial lawyers value, or they just don't put enough time into it, is the prep of their client, right? Witness prep for direct examination. Spend a lot of time on cross-examination, worrying about that, and working on their openings and closings and things. But like, I mean, after going to the trial lawyers college in 2013 is when I really started upping my game in that regard, and then meeting you and seeing how you do it, in your programs. And I spend like, I'll spend, there was a depot of a plaintiff that we just took, and I had the plaintiff come to my office for 3 hours every single week for 6 or 7 weeks leading up to the depot. You need to not only prep your clients for trial, but you have to prep them for depot, because depot is trial, as they say, right?
absolutely.
And not out to our friends John Romano and Sage Oliver, and depot is trial, and it works on both ways. Just you taking their depots, but also them taking your client's depot.
No, I couldn't agree with you more, because if your client's great in depot, it's going to move the needle tremendously to getting it resolved for the fair and full value. Whereas, because they're going to be confident, they know their story. If the defense lawyer likes them, and not only that, but believes them, well, they're going to go back and report that, because they don't want to get their asses kicked in trial. And especially on some of these smaller cases that some of these more volume firms are handling with a $25,000 or $100,000 policy, those, obviously the more they can get those resolved without having to go through long litigation is the better. So it's everything, Mr. Doyle. One, I'm teaching 1/3 class, and it's going to be it's going to be like a workshop with our friend, member Mar Dardalian. It's going to be like an improv, like a cross improv, because I've really been working on, a lot of my cross skills and trying to make it,
Well, Mara's great, and she's gonna really, I'm sure she's gonna add a lot of entertainment to that. Yeah.
oh, she's very excited because,
Yeah.
that's her passion, is the improv.
Yeah,
And
she's a comedian. She's fantastic.
yeah, she's a stand-up comedian. So we're going to have a lot of fun there. And, oh, Conal, if people need to get a hold of you, how do they do so?
Yeah, I mean, I'm easy to find on the internet. Just Google my name, you'll find the website. Conal at ConalDoyleLaw.com. It's not a surprise that Doyle Law was taken when I started my website 20 years ago. 20 years ago it was, but so it's Conal at Conal Doyle Law, and the website's ConalDoyleLaw.com, and all the numbers and everything are there.
All right. And this, make sure everybody knows that. I mean, I'm sure everybody knows, but the conference is June 4th through 7th. We got it's going to be, I think it's going to be our greatest conference. I try to improve every time, but we got 4 lecture tracks, 8 workshop tracks, classes, people like David D. Robert is teaching a masterclass on employment.
He's phenomenal.
Dale Gallipo on civil rights, Pat Selby Jr. on med mal. Just so many. Nick Raleigh's teaching. He's also teaching a TBI class, kind of more geared toward trial, not towards the workup of it. So it's really, but if you miss it, all those lecture tracks are going to be recorded and going to be on TLU on demand. Oh, and it's really fun too, though, because I know you're not a theme party guy, but maybe you'll put a pair of sunglasses on for a Rock of Ages. I mean, actually,
Right,
I did a Rock of Ages to dress up as your favorite rock star, so you could sing live band karaoke. Because I knew Conal wouldn't even need to really dress up, so he could just show up as the rock star. And although getting him to sing would be quite a bit, that would be.
Speaking of our favorite rock star, our friend Lawrence is here now, I think, to cut my hair. Dan and I introduced you to this guy, years ago.
And I'm moving back to California at the end of this year, not just so I can try cases, 'cause I'm licensed there, but is so Lawrence can start cutting my hair again
Yeah.
too. So
So
that, and he
Lawrence is a
said,
rock star on the side. He has a rock band that's a spoof of the '80s. He's amazing, and he cuts hair during the day, and he actually comes to my office and cuts it out there on the balcony. So, yeah, it's funny, small world.
small world.
I'll
Well,
tell him you said
Conal,
hey.
since you have to get your hair cut, and because he said, "How do you want my hair to look?" I said, "Just make me as handsome as Conal." He said, "Dan, I'm only a hairstylist. I'm not God." And so
Stop it.
that's where I
Stop
had
it.
to
Stop
leave
it.
it off. All right, Conal. Well, it's great hanging out with you. Great seeing you, and I can't wait to say we just got to hang out a little bit in Cabo last weekend at your friend Gary Dordick's trial. Gosh, that was a wonderful time, and
It's always a
I
good
look
time.
forward to seeing you in Huntington Beach on June 4th. So
Sounds
take
good,
care, buddy.
Great to see you.
Yeah. You too.
See you soon.
Ready to train with the Titans and set records with your verdicts? Register for our live conferences and boot camps at triallawyersuniversity.com. Start getting your reps in before the big event by going to tluondemand.com to gain instant access to live lectures, case analysis, and skills training videos from the trial lawyer champions you love and respect, as well as pleadings, transcripts, PowerPoints, and notes for a roadmap to victory. Join the group that continues to get extraordinary results. Trial Lawyers University, produced and powered by LawPods.